Technology is an important aspect in our lives, especially that we are now facing the COVID-19 pandemic. We make use of the technology in the field of education. Ladies and gentlemen, a pleasant morning to all of us. I am Laurel GMA D. Suarez. And this morning, we are going to observe the social, ethical, and legal responsibilities in the use of technology tools and resources. Since we are now using the technology when it comes to teaching and of course in the learning of our students, we as teachers must know what are the appropriate ways in using the computer. And with that, I have prepared here the list of the appropriate ways in using the said computer. The first one, of course, we must keep in mind that the use of computer must support the existing curriculum. It supports the existing curriculum in a way that when we utilize the computer, it is always aligned or in line with the goals and objectives of our curriculum. And then the next one, it should not dictate the teaching methods that the teacher uses. We must always keep in mind that when it comes to utilizing the computer, its main purpose is to aid the teaching and the learning process and of course, for the betterment of the learning of our students. So we as teachers must only utilize the computer in order to improve our way of teaching and not use the computer as the main teaching method. And of course, the last one that we have here is that it should not overpower both the teaching and the learning process of our dear teachers and students. We know that especially our students are very much fascinated with the use of the technology, like for example this computer. So we as teachers must guide our students in order for the computer to not overpower the way of learning of our students. We must teach them that there are also other ways in order for them to learn, like for example using other visual aids or visual materials and even through listening and application or real-life application of our lessons. Now let's talk about the acceptable use policy. What are the policies when it comes to using computer and other technologies? The first one is that we must be able to explain to our students what are their online responsibilities. Now we are in an era where we are utilizing the technology at its optimum level, so the students must be able to know and they must be aware that they also have responsibilities when it comes to utilizing the technology and especially when going online. The second one, it should always be connected to the teaching and the learning process of our students. So when we are using the technology, we must always keep in mind that we are using this in order for us to improve our learning for the betterment of our understanding of that certain topic. The third one, since we have already explained to them what are their responsibilities when it comes to using online platforms like for example the internet, social media, and other sites, so they must also be able to know and we as teachers must also be able to explain to our students what are the consequences if ever they violate these policies. And the fourth one, the students must also be aware that there are existing copyright laws when it comes to violating those policies. Like for example, since we are now using technology and there are a lot of articles published online, so we as teachers must educate our students that there is an existing copyright law, so they must be able to know how to properly cite those websites or those articles that they are going to make as references in their studies. And lastly, is to provide equal access for all. Since we are now in an inclusive education, our main goal or our main aim as educators is to ensure that all students, all the needs of our students are catered regardless of their race, age, sexuality, or even their special needs. Now you know what are the appropriate use in making or in using the technology and also what are the policies. Now let's talk about the ethical and the legal use of technology. The first one in the list is for us teachers to only save in our favorites or in our computer the approved approved websites because of course our students will be using the computer, so we must ensure that the first one that they can see in our favorites or the first one that they can open are those approved websites. Like for example, we have here in Carta Kids, we also have here Khan Academy Kids, in which it contains only those related materials for learning and of course for improving their knowledge. And then after that, we must also ensure that the websites that they are using and the websites that they are opening are all subject-related websites. Like for example, if I am a Filipino teacher, so the websites that I am only going to allow them to open are those websites that are connected to our lessons. For example, we are talking about No Limitang, so they are just going to open those websites that contains facts and other informations about our topic in No Limitang. So we also have here some examples of the websites that are subject related. We have here Coursera, edX, and Udemy. And then the next one, we must be able to educate or to teach our students on how to question the reliability and the authenticity of a website. We know that there are a lot of websites in the internet. There are some that are reliable and there are some that are just made by other people who are not credible enough to provide those information. So we as teachers, we must teach our students on how to search or how to look for the websites that are reliable enough and authentic enough for them to make us a reference when it comes to studying or to improving their knowledge in our topic. And with that, I have here the list on how they are going to question the reliability or to check the reliability and authenticity of a certain website. The first one that we are going to look is the name of the author or of the organization, because in order for us to know if it is reliable enough to cite their articles or their website, we must be able to know who is this person that we are referring to or that we are using in our incitation text. And then the next one, after we check the name of the author or of the organization, we are going to go to the next step, which is to look for the credentials of that author or of that organization. Upon seeing the credentials of that author or of that organization, we will be able to know what are his or her or their ability as an individual or as an entity, and what are their experiences that is related to that certain article that they have published. And most commonly, we can see their credentials in the abouts of the author if they are making a blog. And lastly, we are going to look for the type of domain that the website is using. These domains serve as an identification string for us users, whether they are educational or not, or if they are valid enough to use or not. So some of the valid domains that we are using now are those government domains. Like for example, we have .edu, we also have .com, and we also have .net. Now before we continue to our next topic, let me first ask you a question. You as a teacher or even as an administrator, have you ever thought if you have obligations when you introduce the internet to your students or even to your school? If yes, then let us proceed to our discussion. Here are our obligations when it comes to using the internet and even the computer. So, the first one is that we should only have a limited specific websites. What are these specific websites? Of course, these are the websites that are subject related and are credible enough to make use as a reference when it comes to learning online. Like for example, the Encarta Kids, Khan Academy Kids, we have also Coursera, Udemy, and even edX. And then the next one, the students must close inappropriate websites, and of course, they must tell their teachers about it. The reason why they are going or they must tell their teachers is that for the teachers to make an action regarding that matter. So the teacher can block those inappropriate websites or can even take further actions regarding this one if the appearance of those inappropriate programs don't stop by just blocking it. And of course, we as teachers, we also have obligations when it comes to allowing our students in utilizing the available technologies in our school. And that includes by telling our students what are the procedures before using the computer or before using the technology. It isn't just about the technical use of technology, but it is also about what are our specific procedures when it comes to going into our example, into our computer laboratory. So what is the first thing that they are going to do? What is the second one? And what is the next one that they must follow? And now the students know what are the procedures when it comes to using that technology. Now it is your turn as a teacher to know how to respond when there are certain situations or events that arises, because we as teachers in this 21st century, we are not just teachers, but we are also facilitators. So we must serve as a guide to our students. For example, there are unexpected events. Example, our computer or the computer automatically shut down. So you as teachers, what are you going to do if that computer shut down automatically? And lastly, we must also provide protocol to our students and to other users of the technology and of the computer. So these protocols are the set of rules that they are going to follow when it comes to utilizing or to using our computers and other technologies. With this dynamic frontier of content delivery, emerge questions and concerns about intellectual property rights among content developers and providers. Now, let us discuss what are the compliance of intellectual property rights in the educational setting. First, let's talk about what is an intellectual property right. So, intellectual property right actually protects the ownership and even the control over the creative works and the inventions. And what are these works and inventions? So, the most common IPRs that we have are the copyright, trademarks, and patents. So, this of course includes the literary works or artistic work, inventions, business methods, industrial processes, logos, and even product designs. The first compliance of the educational system in the IPR is the copyright. So, what are copyrights? Copyrights are actually intangible rights granted through the Federal Copyright Act to an author or even to a creator of an original, artistic, or a literary work that can be fixed in a tangible means of expression. We have here the books, which is for the hard copies. We also have electronic files, videos, and even audio recordings. The next one are the patents. So patents are only excluded to those inventions, or it only covers the inventions. These patents are actually under the federal patent law, in which patents for novel, useful, and even non-obvious inventions are granted for a non-renewable 20 years of term, granting the inventor the rights to exclude his or her inventions for making, using, or even selling the invention during that time. So, at the term of their expiration, the invention enters, of course, the public domain. So, we have here the examples of some patented inventions. We have here the magnetic levitation of the train, and we also have here the 3D printer. Lastly, we have trademarks. What are these trademarks? Trademarks are actually just signs, but they aren't just signs because they are recognizable signs that distinguish a specific product or services from the others. Like for example, we have Starbucks, the Starbucks coffee. We also have here Huawei, and we also have Coca-Cola, in which all of them have trademarks, different trademarks that distinguish them from the other products. Now we have a law about this trademark, and it is called the trademark law. And the intent of this law is to make actionable the deceptive and misleading use of marks in the commerce, of course, and also to protect the persons engaged in such commerce against the unfair competition and to prevent fraud and even deception in such commerce by the use of reproduction, copies, counterfeits, or colorable imitations of the registered marks. Now you know what are our obligations, what are the policies, and even what are the intellectual property rights present in the educational setting. And with that, we must always keep in mind that we as users of technology and we as educators and even you as students must be able to utilize the technology at its optimum level and of course to make use of this one as an aid in instruction and of course aid in learning. And with that, I hope that all of you have learned a lot of things in this discussion. And that ends my presentation. Thank you everyone and Maligayang Pagkatuto!